Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to go back to a brewery that has impressed me on previous reviews, and we've got something a little bit different to look at from them today. This is going to be review number 4 from this brewery, but it's the first sour beer that I'm trying from them, so very curious about it, and it's a type of sour beer that I have to admit I've really been enjoying over the last little while. So for this review then we are going to go to a little place just outside of Halmstad in Halland County, to the north of me here in Skåne, and we're going to have a look at beer number 4 from Wapnö Gårdbryggeri, the Wapnö Farm Brewery if you want to translate it into English. This one is called the Örekulla. It comes in at 4.1% ABV, and this one is a Berliner Weisse with blackcurrants, raspberries, blueberries and lingonberries added into the brew. So yeah, this one should be really interesting. The last beers that I've had from this brewery were the that was the Alna, which was a double IPA, the Bielra, which was a single IPA. Both of those were hazy, and then I had the Zantipa, which was a more kind of slightly West Coasty leaning IPA, but more of a kind of combination, to be honest, more like a modern West Coast IPA, I guess you could call that, as of 2020. But all of those beers have been really quite nice. As I said, this is the first sour beer that I'm trying from these guys, and as far as I can figure, this is the first sour beer that they've released through Systembolaget as well. So I'm really curious to see how it turns out, because I have been impressed with the quality of the beers that these guys have been putting out there. And if you've watched the channel recently, you will know that I am a big fan of a berry sour actually, so this one should be right up my street. So yeah, let's see how we go then with this one. This one was released on the 1st of July 2020 as part of the Lokal Osmoskalikt assortment here in Sweden through Systembolaget. But yeah, let's go for it. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Wapnö Gårdbryggeri before. No doubt you will see some more from these guys at some point in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Wapnö Gårdbryggeri and Wapnö Gård, I guess you would call the parent company. So Wapnö, as I've told you before, can be found just to the north of Halmstad in Halland County, a bit to the north of me here in Skåne, in the very south of the country, and this is an estate that dates back to the 14th century, but the new kind of incarnation of the brewery opened back in 2016. So the first mention of the estate goes back to the year 1379 and the Wapnö Vadstena monastery. And at one stage this was owned by Peter Ribbing, who was the grandson of Saint Birgitta, quite famous here in Sweden of course, but later it was taken over by the crown in 1410 after the owner Abraham Brodesen Bad was sentenced to death, but then it was returned to his widow a few years later in 1419. In the 16th century it belonged to the Norwegian family Urup, and then it went to the Beck family before it passed into the hands of Gustav Otto Stenbock in 1661, who seems to be the most famous owner of this kind of estate, if you like, and he was the first Swedish owner since the monastery. His son Magnus took over and ran the estate until his death in 1717, but later in 1741 Georg Bogislav Stel, who was a field marshal and also the county governor of Kalmar, he bought part of Wapnö, and then he founded the Kosta Glassworks along with the Småland county governor Anders Koskol. So together they bought the rest of the estate, and it stayed in the ownership of the same family since, and the current CEO is Lennart Bengtsson. And on this site there's a castle dating from the 18th century, and they've got an ancient runestone there as well, which is one of the few that you're going to find in Halland County. But today Wapnö owns the historical site and they employ around 85 people. It's a company that's kind of, you know, far larger than just a brewery, if you like. There's a lot of other things going on there. On the site there's a dairy, the brewery itself, there's a farm shop, a hotel, a restaurant and things like that. I would love to go and check out the hotel at some point and try some of the stuff from the restaurant actually. I do need to have a look at that. But the farm itself has around 2,500 hectares of land and 450 hectares of forest. The farm produces meat, milk and various different crops, and they've also got a biogas plant from which they run most of their operations, and they've won numerous environmental awards on the back of that. As of July 2020, when I'm producing this review for you, these guys have produced in the region of 35 different types of beer. So, you know, for a brewery that's been around a couple of years, they do seem to be producing a new beer every kind of 2 months, or, you know, 2-3 months, everything, something like that. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about the brewery for the moment. It does seem like a really nice estate company. It reminds me a little bit of Fine Ales from back home in Scotland, so that would be quite cool actually, to see Fine Ales come across to Sweden and do a collaboration with Wapnö, or other way around. That would be quite cool as well. Those are the two kind of estate breweries that I know. I don't know if the Untappd Gårdbryggeri over in, I think the Untappd Gårdbryggeri over in the Kattegat on Öland in Denmark, they're an estate brewery as well. It'd be quite cool to see some of the estate breweries make like a little association and do collaborations and stuff. I think that would be a very interesting thing. But of course, you know, maybe about 2 centuries ago, the whole farm brewing thing was what was going on here in Scandinavia. That was what that's where all the beer came from. It was your local farm you went to get the beer, the Scandinavian farmhouse ales. So yeah, cool to see that you've got breweries like this one, and Opigårds as well as the other obvious example from up in Dalarna. It's good to see that there's these types of estate breweries kind of coming out again. It'd be cool to see, you know, Wapnö and Opigårds having a go at a collaboration as well, actually. I think that would be really cool. So yeah, that's, as I said, that's all I can really tell you about Wapnö Gårdbryggeri for the moment. Hopefully I can get up there at some point soon and take a little look around. That would be something that I definitely would be interested in doing. I just need to kind of find the time, and obviously COVID-19 is making a lot of things a bit silly at the moment, to be honest. So yeah, let's leave it at that for the history section of the video then. So if you want to learn more about the company, you can check out the brewery website in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and of course you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's see how we go with this one then. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork before we open it up. As I said to you earlier, this one is a 4.1% Berliner Weisse. There is blackcurrants, blueberries, raspberries and lingonberries in this one. There you can see is the Wapnö bottle cap. And yeah, I like how this, you know, I do like how this one is presented actually. This one is a little bit different in terms of its presentation from some of the other ones. But yeah, 330ml bottle, this one. I think I paid about 30 crowns for this or something. And you know, the Wapnö beers, for what you get out of them, the quality that you get, I think it's actually pretty damn cheap, to be honest. You know, 35 crowns, €3.50, £3, about $3.50. I have to say that's a pretty good price for, you know, I have to say I think that's a pretty good price for a Berliner Weisse like this. But yeah, nice to present this one. Örekulla, I'm not sure exactly what the name would translate to, but I think most of the Wapnö beers are named after things that are around the estate, so it's probably named after something that's very close there to them. It has a little bit on the back here. In the Swedish part here, it tells you about the fact that they, you know, they grow their own grains and malt them. You know, they grow their own hops a little bit as well, they grow their own fruits to go in the beer. So yeah, pretty much everything that you have in this beer is actually grown on Wapnö Gård. I think the only thing that probably they have to bring in would be the yeast, but they probably, after a while, have developed their own house yeasts and stuff like this. But yeah, 4.1% ABV this one. Let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. I think this is my first Lingon Berliner Weisse, if I remember correctly. But I did have a Lingon sour, I think it was. I think that was just a sour ale rather than a Berliner Weisse. I had that from Revsund's brewery quite recently. But yeah, if you've watched the channel before, you will know that I love a good berry sour. A lot of our desserts back home in Scotland, of course, are based on raspberries and things like that. So yeah, but yeah, look at this one. Look at that lovely kind of almost purpley red winey type colour there. That is lovely and thick. So if we shine the light through this one, definitely a big kind of hazy beast this, but I think in terms of colour it's fair to describe this one as a sort of maroon burgundy type colour, almost like a Heart of Midlothian football jersey. Not sure how relevant a reference that is for those of you watching here in Sweden, but Heart of Midlothian, famous football club in Edinburgh, it's about the same colour as their football shirts. So yeah, nice kind of burgundy maroon type colour this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, but a few little ones going up towards the surface there. The head, as you could see, was just a very thin foamy kind of pinkish purple layer on top of the beer, and that's faded away just to be nothing. But if we put the If we put the light through that, this beer is pretty much hazy as hell. So that'll be the wheat, and it'll also be the kind of remnants of the different berries and stuff like that have been put in here. You can see little teeny bits of the berries kind of floating around in this, which is quite nice. It's going to be very nice, very sharp and juicy, I think. But just going from the wee whiff of the aroma that I got, I think this one's going to be very smooth, but also very juicy, and hopefully it's got a nice little bit of a juicy tartness to it as well. But yeah, in terms of appearance, nothing particularly surprising about this beer. When you consider what berries that are in it, blackcurrants, blueberries, they're going to give you the darker colour. The raspberries as well can give you a fairly dark colour as well. Lingon, I think they, I think they tend to give you a bit of a kind of cranberry type colour as well. So not surprised about the colour that's in this. But let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Very curious about it. Oh yeah, it comes across very kind of smooth and creamy actually in the aroma. So yeah, straight away with this one, you're going to get a sort of how do you say it? You're going to get a sort of you get, straight away you get the kind of wheaty base of the beer. You do get a bit of oatiness out of this one as well, and it almost smells a little bit like yogurty, that sort of lactosey yogurty type thing. Does it say exactly what ingredients in it? Yeah, this one, this one does have lactose in it, but it doesn't say. It just says wheat malt. It doesn't have oats in it, so yeah, the lactose is giving you the impression of that kind of oaty creaminess out of this one. But yeah, the lactose and the wheat in this one are the two most noticeable things. So yeah, this one, it smells like almost very yogurty in the base. It really smells like petit filou yogurts, to be honest with you. Like a nice kind of strawberry, raspberry, kind of fruit yogurt, basically, a berry yogurt. That's what this beer smells like. So yeah, the base of this beer, you've got a nice kind of bready wheatiness. You've got a nice little bit of a kind of oaty, creamy quality to it. As I say, there's not oats in this though, but it does smell quite oaty and creamy. You can get that lovely kind of yogurty quality out of it that's a little bit, it almost gives you the kind of lactosey impression of this beer, which I think is quite nice. But you've also got just a little touch of a kind of biscuity note in this one. So I think that's quite an interesting quality there. So yeah, I think that's the aroma out of the malt base, the kind of sweeter base of this beer is quite interesting. So yeah, very yogurty, very kind of wheaty and bready at the same time, but also a little bit oaty and creamy too. But yeah, on the fruity side of things then, well, when we talk about the hops actually, you do get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. You get a wee bit of grassiness as well. Probably they've used, if they're growing their own variety of hops, it'll maybe be like a Magnum or something like that they're using. I know that quite a few hop farms, including Kronogårdens, which is here in Skåne, if I'm pronouncing that rightly, they grow Magnum, and they've got a few of their own varieties as well. I'm not sure if Wapnö will have their own varieties of hops, but from what I understand, Magnum is a variety that grows quite well here in Sweden. It's probably something like that they're using in it, because you do get, when you take it in a bit more deeply, you do get a nice little bit of a floral character out of it, and it's quite a bright floral note that you get out of this one. And I do like that about this beer. But yeah, a little touch of earthiness in there, a little bit of a kind of brighter floral note and some nice grassiness as well. Usually what you would use in these beers would be like a Hallertau or a Tittnanger or something, one of these traditionally low alpha acid German varieties of hop, because you don't want these beers to be too bitter, because that takes away from the sourness. It kind of combats the sourness a little bit. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, this is where this beer really kind of comes into its own, and it actually smells very juicy. Usually, the black currants are going to give you a bit of the juiciness, but raspberries and blueberries can be very sharp and tart. They can kind of dominate the aroma, but they don't really in this one. I've got a feeling you can smell some of the juicy lingon under this, and lingon isn't a flavour that too many people I think will be familiar with, unless you're in one of the Scandinavian countries. I really can't remember how popular lingon is back home actually, but the fruity side of this is really, the fruity side of this one is very nice actually. I like how it goes together. Lovely kind of fruity juiciness coming out of the beer. Yeah, this one really doesn't smell all that kind of sharp and citric. You do get a little bit of sharpness from the raspberries and the blueberries, but the other parts of it are really very kind of almost more oily and juicy, to be fair with you. I think that's probably you know, that is probably the kind of majority of things you're getting out of this. So I do like that about how this beer goes together. The aroma that comes out of this is very, very nice. So yeah, the aroma of this is great. So yeah, juicy kind of fruits out of this one. The lingon and the blackcurrants, I think, are making this one a little bit more juicy, but you will get the impression of a few kind of like figgy or kind of plummy notes coming out of this one too. So that's a really interesting combination of aromas that you get in here. So yeah, let's leave it at that for the aroma. Let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. So this one is the Örekulla Berliner Weisse at 4.1% ABV with blackcurrants, blueberries, raspberries and lingonberries in this one. So yeah, let's have a taste of this and see how we got on then. Very curious to see how this beer turns out. Slange, skål. Ooh, yeah. It's very, this one, it's actually a lot less thick and a bit more wet than I was expecting from the aroma. The aroma gave the impression that this was going to be a very, very kind of thick, almost creamy, bready sort of thing, and it does come out more in the aftertaste in fairness, but the first impression of this beer is that it's really quite wet. Actually, it's got a good bit more tartness to it as well. So this is one that definitely doesn't taste like the aroma would have you believe. It does come across quite differently, to be honest with you. So yeah, I like beers that do this, that test your palate a little bit. They mess with you. As I always say, take a bit of time with these and let them open up. You have to have a few sips of a sour to let your mouth adjust to the sourness before you actually, before you actually examine the beer properly. Yeah. In fairness, this one, it's actually, it's quite well balanced, to be honest with you. I do find this one, very light in a lot of ways. I like this. This is it's a good Berliner Weisse. It's definitely got a nice bit of tartness to it, but at the same time, the fruit is quite like wet and juicy. It takes a little bit of time to get your head around it, in fairness. I think that's fair to say on this one. So yeah, definitely one of the kind of wetter Berliner Weisses that I've come across. But normally, as I say, you do expect these beers to be fairly smooth and just a little bit thicker. So that's the first thing I'm noticing about this one. And you do get the wheaty notes and the kind of lactosey qualities out of this one in the aftertaste. Maybe they've just been a little touch heavy on the lactose and they need to put a bit more, they maybe need to put a bit more wheat in this one, I think. It maybe just needs, because it doesn't, to be honest with you, yeah, the wheaty notes come out as more of, they do come out in the aftertaste and they linger there in the aftertaste. It does, you know it's a Berliner Weisse, but I think it's the lactose. The lactose, I think, really dominates this one, which is kind of interesting. The lactose gives you a really big kind of smoothness to this beer. And don't get me wrong, this is a nice beer, but I think if it's a Berliner Weisse, I do think you need just a bit more wheat in it, a bit more of a wheaty presence to it than this one has. But yeah, the fruity side of this one though is very nice. I really like the fruity side of it, but I do think it needs a little bit more wheat in it, just to either needs a little bit more wheat or just a little bit less lactose, to be honest with you. I do think that's fair to say about this one. But yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this beer then. So yeah, straight away with this beer, you'll feel the big kind of creamy lactosey quality. That goes right across the middle third of your palate and towards the kind of back third of your tongue as well. What you'll find is that as you go further into the aftertaste with this one, the lactose kind of lingers there and it gives you that sort of yogurty quality. As you move further forward on the on that kind of middle third of your tongue, you do get a bit more of a kind of oaty, creamy quality out of the beer. which is quite nice. As I say, there's not oats in this beer, but to me, the flavours that you get out of this really remind me of the oats. But then, yeah, you can feel the middle of your palate. You start to get more of the white bready and kind of wheaty qualities out of this one as well. I think there's a bit of pale malt in this. You can taste a little bit of the pale malty white bready thing there. But as you go towards the back third of your palate, you can definitely feel the slightly thicker wheaty white bready note. But that becomes a lot more obvious the further that you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, I think, yeah, you get a little touch of biscuity sweetness in the middle of your palate there. As I say, a nice kind of smooth white bready wheaty thing underneath. But yeah, then the lactosey notes, they kind of sit across the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate. It's really nice how that goes together. Actually, I really like how everything just kind of combines together in this beer. Actually, it's really nicely done. In terms of the hoppy bitterness and things like that on the hoppy side of the beer, in the back corners of the palate you do get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. As you move further forward, you can feel that does just spread forward a little bit. You've got a nice wee touch of a floral kind of note on the front corners of the palate as well. Then as you go round the very front curve of the palate, it's just a little bit lighter and grassy for me. Then behind the front curve of the tongue, on that front third of the palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters come out of the beer. And for me, the fruity esters that come out of the hops, they're kind of like, you know, quite light and figgy, if that makes sense. But you've got everything else in this one. You've got all the other fruity characters in there which are giving the beer its complexity, if you like. So let's try and see how we can break these down. So yeah, I think the raspberries and the blueberries are really giving you the more kind of tart qualities of the beer. You can feel the blueberries, the blackcurrants rather, just kind of spreading a little bit further back on the front of the tongue there. But you can also feel the lingon. I think in the aroma, the lingon is giving the beer a little bit of juiciness, but in the flavour it's definitely adding to that sharpness. On the tip of your tongue it is actually really quite sharp and really quite puckering, which is quite interesting. But the thing you always have to watch with these beers is that when you add fruit to the beer, when you add fruit into the beer, you know, it goes around the, you know, the thing is it always suppresses a little bit of the green side of the beer, it always suppresses a little bit of the IBU. So, yeah, it's interesting, you know, you have to watch for that. With these beers, it just takes away a little bit of the IBUs. But yeah, around the edge of the tongue, it's the raspberries, the blueberries and a little bit of the lingon that's there, but I think the blackcurrants, they just sort of spread back on that front third of the tongue a wee bit, and behind that you get the nice juicy figgy qualities, those type of juicy figgy notes coming out of the beer. It's almost a little touch like plummy or raisiny or something as well on the front of the palate too. But yeah, it's an interesting one. This, as I say, I think the lactose is maybe just a little bit dominant in this one, that kind of yogurty flavour, but at the same time the beer does feel kind of fairly wet, in fairness, compared to other Berliner Weisses that I've had as well. So that's an interesting point to make about this one. So yeah, really interesting beer, I have to say. It's quite different from the other ones that I've had from Wapnö Gårdbryggeri as well. So yeah, let's leave it at that for the tasting section. Let's talk about the mouthfeel of this beer. Like I said, this is a kind of, I would say that this beer is mainly, it's quite a wet sour. I mean, in some ways it feels quite thick, but in some ways it does feel quite wet as well. I'd say this is kind of a mid-bodied sour, to be honest with you, but it's leaning a bit towards the thicker side of things. Carbonation, fairly smooth. The mouthfeel overall quite wet. And as I say, there's just a kind of interesting level of thickness to this beer. In terms of the hoppy bitterness and things, I think you'd be lucky to get about 10 IBUs out of this one, you know, 5 or 10 IBUs, not a lot going on in with that regard. Lovely kind of smooth, as I say, lovely kind of smooth base to this one. Got a bit of that kind of slightly thicker lactosey quality to the beer, and you've also got some, you've got a good bit of juicy fruity quality to this one, but it's a little bit tartar on the very kind of tip of the tongue, if you like. So it's an interesting one, this. It really is an interesting beer. That's definitely a little bit lactose heavy, I think, and a bit yogurty. in some ways, but it works out quite nicely. Some people like their Berliner Weisses that way. Personally, I prefer them to be a little bit more on the wheaty side of things, or a little bit more oaty than lactosey. This one to me is like a kind of yogurt drink, to be honest with you. It does remind me of these, what are they called? You can get these yogurt drinks in the, I used to get them on the way to work, but I forget what, is it Orla? I forget what the name of the yogurt drink that I used to sometimes get was called. I always enjoyed those, but yeah, the this beer, it's quite interesting in that regard. I have to say, I do like how it goes together. It does remind me of like a yogurt, a berry kind of yogurt drink, if you like. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one, as I say, I think if I compare it to the other beers that I've had from Wapnö, it's maybe, I think I prefer the IPAs and stuff like that these guys are doing, but I would be open-minded and try some of the other sours too. It is a nice beer, don't get me wrong on that, but as I say, I personally prefer my Berliner Weisses to be a bit more, I do prefer them to be a bit more kind of wheaty leaning than this. And this one, the wheat comes out, the thing that lingers into the aftertaste for this one is the lactose towards the front of the palate, but also a bit of the wheaty quality further back and some of the juicy fruits as well. So I like how this one, I do like how this one goes together actually. This one for me is very, very nice. So yeah, it's a nice tasting beer, this one. If you like a big kind of sharp berry beer, you will enjoy this, but as I say, be aware as a Berliner Weisse, definitely a bit more kind of lactose and thick if you like. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was the Örekulla, a 4.1% Berliner Weisse with lactose, wheat, and then black currants, blueberries, raspberries and lingonberries added to the brew. Another interesting beer from Wapnö Gårdbryggeri, and as I always say, I will keep an eye on the beers that these guys are producing. As far as I know, this was the first sour beer that they've released into Systembolaget. I would recommend that you try the Alna. That's probably the best beer that I've had from these guys so far, the double IPA, but I do want to review like a stout or something like that. I know these guys have got stouts and things, but I don't think they've come through Systembolaget yet, so need to try and figure out something to get a hold of one of those. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Wapnö Gårdbryggeri as well, and I will catch you guys very, very soon. This one was the Örekulla 4.1% Berliner Weisse with wheat, lactose, black currants, blueberries, raspberries and lingonberries added to the brew, released on the 1st of July 2020 as part of the Lokal Småska League assortiment in Systembolaget here in Sweden. Slanje, skål, make sure you check out Wapnö Gårdbryggeri, go and visit the Red Castle in Halmstad, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Hopefully I can get up there and visit Wapnö Gårdbryggeri myself and have a go at their restaurant. Cheers.